Okay, people, let's talk about clustomers. A clustomer is what happens when marketers fail to personalize their marketing, grouping customers with different behaviors, different interests, motivators, purchase patterns, you name it, all into one tangled mess. But with MailChimp, marketers can untangle that mess using real-time behavior data to personalize every email you send. Turn clustomers into customers with Intuit MailChimp, the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform now with SMS.
This is where projects come to life. Our showrooms are designed to inspire with the latest products from top brands, curated in an inviting, hands-on environment, and a team of industry experts to support your project. We'll be there to make sure everything goes as planned, from product selection to delivery coordination. At Ferguson Bath, Kitchen and Lighting Gallery, your project is our priority.
Discover great brands like Brizo at your local Ferguson showroom.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, she vanished after wandering away from police lockup. 11 months later, her body was found in a canyon. Did she walk off to die, or was she the victim of a crime? We'll review the podcast Lost Hills, Dark Canyon. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
I'm Malcolm Gladwell, and I want to tell you about an awesome new podcast.
Oh, God, no, not again.
I was going to do that.
You can do that? But let me give you an ad inside of this ad. That awesome podcast is brought to you by Underarm Deodorant.
LifeLock.
LifeLock.
I'm just wondering, okay, let me just introduce everybody and then we can talk about this. Also with us is our private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author.
Toby gave me the finger because I stole his bit.
Of the Piper Grade series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, I'm not giving anyone the finger, so.
You're just thinking it.
And finally, our resident doubting Thomas and the world's biggest Malcolm Gladwell fan, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Stranger Rivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hi, Rebecca. I'm so proud to let you know about this fabulous... It says something about how fucking annoying and ubiquitous and annoying Malcolm Gladwell is that both Kevin and I... We're going to do a bit as we got introduced because, my God, there's probably 6 or 7 minutes of Gladwell on each episode of this, and he's got nothing to do with this show at all other than
it's his network,
being in charge
Pushkin.
it's being in charge of the network.
Yeah.
Toby, by the way, it wasn't my idea. Rebecca sent me a note saying, be Malcolm Gladwell.
Because Kevin walked into the living room a couple of times listening to the podcast, and he would just randomly go, I'm Malcolm Gladwell.
I can't wait. I have exciting news for you.
And it comes out of nowhere, again and again.
Well, it's also
a heavy
dude,
ad load.
We know who you are. I don't care about the ad load in podcasts. You know, I don't complain about that typically, but I am so relieved every time I find out someone else doesn't like Malcolm Gladwell besides me. It's such a relief. It honestly is. It's such a relief. It's like Malcolm Gladwell is one of those people that somebody sometime, like Ira Glass or whatever, because Ira Glass was a big Malcolm Gladwell fan. Ira Glass told people they were supposed to like Malcolm Gladwell. So this whole generation of people believe they're supposed to like Malcolm Gladwell. I've never understood it. And then when I hear these ads and I'm like, no.
Well, I don't think it's really his fault, but he's one of those guys who just goes so far outside of his area of expertise and tries to draw these like grand conclusions about
Which is
stuff.
What's his area of expertise?
I don't know, but he apparently ran cross country in college or something. But
What the hell?
like when people who are actually experts in this stuff, you hear them critique it, it's like, oh, like he's just kind of like thinking about it and trying to come up with something, but it's not really evidence based.
He became famous for saying that if you do anything for 10,000 hours, you could be an expert on it. No fucking shit. Really?
Yeah.
Is that why there's so many mid-rolls? He's trying to get 10,000 hours of ads. It's like, I'm just working on it. I'll be an expert someday.
I'll be an expert very, very soon.
All right. That's not what we're
6
talking
minutes a
about in
pop.
this podcast, obviously. Sorry, everybody who works with Malcolm, who probably thinks he's a wonderful person.
I'm sure he's very nice
I'm
to
sure
hang
he's
out with.
super nice. I'm sure he's super
In
duper
small
nice.
doses.
Yeah.
I just don't want to have to read his book.
So remember, it's at Reb Lavoie on X, formerly Twitter.
Kevin Flynn at boop. All right, so Kevin, this is obviously a show.
It is a show.
We can't say Monday show because we're obviously on a different schedule in the summer. What is coming up in our future show?
Well, at some point, we will be talking about In the Dark Season 3, but we're waiting for a couple more episodes to come out so that we can have a little better taste of that. But in the meantime, we're going to be talking next Monday about this documentary on Max. It's called Teen Torture Inc.
All right, that sounds uplifting.
As in incorporated, I think, yeah.
And by the way, we are seeing all of your requests on our Facebook page for things to review. We make note, and Kevin adds them to the list. So just FYI, we're not paying attention to that. All right. Well, we've given it a tease already. Should we go ahead and talk about the thing we're talking about on this episode of Crime Writers On?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's go ahead and drop that first clip right now. Leading off.
From the beginning, every aspect of the case seemed off. What was wrong? How she was arrested, how she was released, how she was searched for, how her remains were discovered, how her remains were recovered, and how her death was investigated.
In 2009, after her release from the LA County Sheriff's Department on a minor arrest, Mitrice Richardson walked into the night and vanished. Her naked, mummified body was discovered months later in a remote Malibu Canyon creek bed. Authorities said the cause and manner of her death were undetermined.
So the fact that I didn't see any trauma in the bones doesn't mean trauma didn't happen. It's always possible that a gunshot wound can go through and through a body without hitting bone. Same thing for a stab wound.
Mitrice's family accused the department of botching the investigation, mishandling her remains, and ignoring signs of foul play. They also failed to get answers from the last person who saw her alive, a man with a violent past living in a wilderness fort near the creek.
I didn't realize she was screaming loud enough that I go, the cops are going to be here soon. I'm going to get out of here. So I went home.
Lost Hills, Dark Canyon is the 4th season of the true crime podcast from Pushkin Industries and Western Sound. Host Dana Goodyear traces Mitrice's last steps in an effort to learn how she died. She also identifies a new person of interest and tries to do what detectives couldn't, get evidence against this prime suspect. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from Lost Hills, Dark Canyon. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Laura, this is a story about a lot of things, but there's one plot point in particular that made me think about you and like how you might be feeling when you heard it. Mitrice's mother calling the police station the night before and saying, "Do not let her go. She doesn't know where she is. Just make sure to keep her there. If you want me to come pick her up, I will, but I don't want to be reading a headline about her tomorrow," or something like that. What were your thoughts about this? I mean, it's like her mother was telling the cops like something bad is going to happen if you let her go.
Right. I was cleaning my kitchen while I was listening to this. And that was the point where my counters got really clean because I was like, are you fucking kidding me? It's like, here's somebody that you know clearly has some mental health challenges, obviously was in this restaurant, got picked up for not paying their bill, talking about Michael Jackson. And the police are like, oh, whatever. So I'm drawn into this. I'm like, here is a vulnerable person. Here is a Black woman with mental health challenges. Here is somebody dismissing all of that. And then the mother had the wherewithal to be like, hey, heads up, heads up. And then when they release her and she's like, what do you mean? And then she wants to do a missing persons report. And they're like, yeah, well, you have to da, 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 da. And then finally one of the cops is like, well, maybe we'll let you do a missing persons report. And the fact that she was like, it's going to be a headline. And oh, whoops, guess what? It's a headline. That was the thing I was like raging about in the beginning of this podcast. Now, as the podcast went on, other things I didn't love about it, but I liked that setup because it was, for me, it was like, here is something where my justice hackles are going to get up because somebody is being, in my mind, kind of taken advantage of, somebody that is coming from a vulnerable population that is not being taken seriously. And I was like, whoop, okay, shiny counters.
So at the beginning of the podcast, Toby, we get some setup about Mitrice and her story. In particular, we hear from an ex-girlfriend of hers. How do you think the podcast handles her backstory as a victim?
So I thought this was actually kind of, I thought, the best part of the podcast. And it started off in a way that I was like not that excited about, which is you're kind of hearing about how like bright, spunky, and popular she was. And you get these diary entries where she's happy and ambitious and all this stuff. And I was like, oh God, it's going to be one of these. But then that's the setup for her sort of mental decline. And then you hear more of her diary entries, and they're clearly, there's mental illness issues.
What is this entry about? LOL. I must have been high. Mike, Jack. Me and I are split personalities, not me plus you. My mouth is going to be the death of me? More like I. More like I. What the fuck is going on? Where's my mind?
So between the switch in the diaries and then talking to her former girlfriend about what she experienced from the beginning of their relationship until when their relationship ended, when Mitrice really seems to be just barely functional, essentially, with her mental illness problems, I thought was really, really affecting. And you do have, at least I had, definite feelings of compassion for Mitrice and what she'd been through. And that makes the way the police handled her be all that more sort of hard to understand and enraging. But then after that, I feel like we kind of lose that thread a little bit. I feel like Mitrice kind of fails to be part of the story until the very, very end. And the sort of investigation takes over, and you get a little bit from her friends and family and stuff. But the whole focus shifts, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is kind of like, it's almost like, wait, who is Mitrice again? By the time you get to, episode 10 or whatever.
I actually feel that way about a lot of elements of this podcast. I mean, we get, a scene at the beginning where somebody in the sheriff's department walks out, right after she leaves, and that sort of thread is dropped. We get, a lot of very long sort of lugubrious stuff in between advancing of plot points and exposition. I mean, Kevin, some of these initial episodes and the episodes in the middle are quite long. Do you feel like that takes away from the narrative? I mean, I'm telling you, that's how I felt. I don't want to ask you a leading question. What did you think about the pacing of the podcast in that regard?
Well, one of my issues with the finished product is that once it's completed and you've gotten through the 12 episodes, you realize that a huge amount of effort was put into the reporting, but we don't get a sense of that until much later in the series. It doesn't really get interested until episode 8, where we start getting like what is being turned up here. And so any curiosity that was initially raised in episode 1 about this guy in the video has dissipated long before we hear his name again. So I think there was like too much time spent on the build-up to the discovery of her body. Again, we don't get that until episode 6. There's just a lot of build. I think there was like almost an entire episode about the restaurant and the arrest. And I just felt like, I think that as a whole, the podcast series is way too long. A lot of these episodes are way too long. They could have just been way more ruthless with their edits. And instead of having so many utilitarian sound bites, Dana, the host, could have just moved the story along with some tighter exposition. And unless the goal is to get to 12 episodes, which is what happens in this industry to the detriment of story sometimes, it doesn't need to be this padded.
Yeah. Well, we have to hear about all the LifeLock podcast impressions.
It doesn't make you go along any quicker.
No, I agree. No, I actually agree with you. But the other thing, too, I mean, it was episode 6 where we found the body. Mm-hmm. And finding the body is actually kind of the whole fucking point of this thing, because where the body was, how hard it is to get to, how she could have gotten there. And by the way, how to get there ends up being a whole other 2 or 3 episodes, right? How hard it is to get there. But that's kind of the point, is that it's a mystery how she died and how she got where her body was, right, Laura?
Well, it is. And I think the thing is that mystery could have been hyped up a lot more in the way that the story was told. So, they find her and they remove her remains from this canyon before the coroner can look at them on site. That leads to this dispute between the sheriff's department and the coroner. There's an internal inquiry. The friends and family are now suspicious, what's happening? Something seems amiss. And now both agencies claim to have no records related to finding the body. Nothing connected to the search.
They sent her clothes to the funeral home.
Yep. No records of the operation when they went out in like 2009 and disrupted the illegal pot farm that was out there where she was found. So here's the thing. That's interesting. The fact that she was found out in the middle of the like inaccessible place that you could only get to through the porn ranch was interesting. The trail in the woods was interesting, but the problem was when they're telling about this trail in the woods like over and over and over again, like episode after episode, I just like lost interest. I'm like, okay, it was interesting for like the beginning, but now we're out in the woods again, walking in circles. Like what's happening now? Oh, now we're in a helicopter a few years back.
So much poison oak in this podcast, right?
Yeah. So I feel like there was elements of this that if I was like looking at this from a like investigative standpoint, I'd be like, okay, this is something that doesn't make sense. But because we have just so much, like the muddle in the middle, I'll call it, it loses the ability, for me anyway, to follow along and pay attention because there was just so much that didn't need to be in there. And the parts that could have been really interesting were just hidden in the muck.
When Dana and her producer first met that first guy who was trying to help them get in, and they realized they'd been going for hours and they were on their hands and knees and cutting down the thing and they'd only gone for 2 hours and it's still really far away, I was like, that's literally how I feel listening to this podcast. It felt like symbolic of the experience of listening to the episode I was listening to. I mean, Toby, you had issues with the pacing too, right? You have a note about that as well.
Yeah, and I think, it starts in episode 1 where they have a forensic pathologist, I think, just talking at length about the autopsy and just like stuff that just isn't germane to anything. It's like they just decided to run the entire thing thinking that maybe you'd be interested in hearing the totality, or I don't know. But the information to minutes we listened to was like not a good ratio.
In this particular case, there's several possibilities. There are rattlesnakes there. She could have been bitten by a rattlesnake. There's also fire ants. She could have had a severe allergic reaction to something. There's poison oak there. That's horrible. It's everywhere. And some people are more sensitive than others.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like people just like throw in tangents or like, here's something about this guy or here's something about this guy to kind of pad their story out. And this, it just kind of felt like it all kind of stayed on task, but just at great length and just using twice as many words as they really needed to in a lot of the parts. Yes, that was frustrating, and sometimes it made it hard to just focus and sort of the momentum that you would feel for some of these things, like these searches that they go on to pass to try and see how she could have gotten there. It's just like, my God, like this could be, I guess, a little suspenseful, but the fact that it's so slow just makes it feel like the slog that I guess they experienced.
Well, it's never a slog when you get us on Patreon because we have so many great podcasts.
Way to get to the point.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, all of our podcasts there are like high energy, all of them. It's like drinking Red Bull.
Yeah.
So join us at patreon.com/partners in crime media.
Wait, no. This is Rebecca Lavoie. Let me tell you about the incredible podcast we have
so
on
excited.
our Patreon.
I can't wait to tell you about all these incredible podcasts that we have. They include the Crime Writers on After Show.
Yes.
We have Married with Podcast, in which Rebecca and I dole out advice.
Yes.
We have Rebecca's game show. It's called Other People's Problems.
Summer special.
And it also has extended, near daily updates in the Karen Reed trial called The Readathon.
I know. It's pretty fun.
We also have Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. Laura, what do you have planned for upcoming episodes of Leave It to Bricker?
Coming up is going to be my excursion on Cape Cod, where I managed to get backstage during a Ukrainian rock concert.
A Ukrainian rock concert. Sounds interesting.
It was very interesting.
Always very interesting is the discussions that Toby Ball has. Is it our discussion? I think I totally got the verb tense wrong on that, but Toby Ball is very interesting. And so are his discussions on the deep dive. Toby, what is the next book that the folks who want to get ready for the deep dive, they should be reading on the beach?
The book, and because it is the summer, it's July, it's actually a novel. So it's a beach read. It's called Bright Young Women, a Novel by Jessica Knoll, spelled with a K.
Jessica Knoll. No, just kidding. It's Jessica Knoll.
And who's going to be on your panel?
Alison Horrocks, who was on the Trailed deep dive a couple years ago, and Rebecca Lavoie.
Yeah.
Lavoie. And remember, you can get episodes of Crime Writers on early and ad-free there as well. Now, we also have an Amazon storefront where you can see some of our favorite things. Rebecca, what are this week's CWO Amazon recommendations?
All right, I just got these, and I really like them. I was previously giving myself, painting my toenails, giving myself little pedicures, and using like a paper towel to keep my toes separated, right? Mm-hmm. I just got a pair of flip-flops that have little toe separators for all your toes.
Oh my.
So that you can just give yourself a pedicure and like all your toes are separated in the flip-flops.
Wait a minute, these walking around flip-flops or are these just for...
You can walk around and you can also use them to sort of like, athletes keep their toes separated too as sort of like a little...
Madness!
Yeah.
This is madness!
But you can use them they're like toe flip-flops to keep all your toes separated so that you can be wearing flip-flops while you paint your toenails.
Unless your Toby ball and your toenails just
rad.
fall off.
They were so cheap. They were only like $15. Anyway, that's my recommendation.
Yeah.
Toe flip-flops.
I know Toby's not going to have that on his list, but Toby, what
he doesn't
are
have any nails.
Your listener-inspired Toby Ball's deep cut recommendations?
Well, I think following on the heels of that one, trying to keep in theme.
I see what you did there.
Heels.
The Funga-Nail Pen Applicator Antifungal Solution kills fungus that can lead to nail and athlete's foot with tolnaftate and clinically proven to cure and purr.
And purr. Vent, probably. Yeah.
Just PR. I don't know what it's going to say. But anyway, it sounds awesome. Also, ACNKTZ 5 light dining room light fixtures, over table industrial kitchen island lighting, adjustable height hanging rectangular chandelier modern poo.
Yeah, so if you think like your purchase could be one of Toby Ball's deep cut recommendations, just stop first at our store, amazon.com/shop/crimewriterson. Then when you do the rest of your shopping, Toby might pick one of your other incredible items that you've done, put it in your own checkout cart, your shopping cart there, and you could be one of Toby's picks. Remember, we earn commissions on qualified purchases.
All right, Kevin, before we wrap up the business section, I have to ask, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Patreon patron saints are Iona Cobb and Laurel Hess. Bless you.
Bless you, Iona. Bless you, Laurel. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon. Thank you for being our saints. And Kevin, should I go ahead and fade that music out right now?
Do it.
Kevin, who's our next wonderful sponsor for this podcast?
We're brought to you by Quince.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, whenever you're gearing up for your next trip, deciding what to pack is always so stressful, and the clothes that you have either don't fit or they're worn out and they just don't match, and you need to be refreshed because when you go on vacation, you want to feel great, so say hello to Quince.
Seriously, say hello to Quince.
Your new go-to for high-quality vacation essentials that you'll be packing for trips to come. Rebecca, you actually just surprised me with that nice seasonal accoutrement.
Kevin, the linen stuff at Quince is incredible.
Yeah.
I've bought myself a couple of linen shirts, like the camp-style linen shirts, and I tie them at the waist and wear them all the time. We were just on a car trip, and I was like, Kevin, I wear this black one all the time. I think I should get another one in a different color. Did it right then, and I ordered one for you, and you love it, do you not?
I do. I love my linen jacket that you purchased for me, so I look... like, I should go on a yacht. I don't know anybody with a yacht, but I really want to go on a yacht just so that
Laser,
I can
yes.
wear that. Yeah, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes.
Pack your bags with high-quality essentials with Quince. Go to quince.com/crime for free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com. That's QUINCE.com/crime. Get free shipping and 365-day-a-year returns. Quince.com/crime.
Crime.
Hey friends, Ted Danson here, and I want to let you know about my new podcast. It's called Where Everybody Knows Your Name, with me, Ted Danson, and Woody Harrelson, sometimes. Doing this podcast is a chance for me and my good bud Woody to reconnect after Cheers wrapped 30 years ago. Plus, we're introducing each other to the friends we've met since, like Jane Fonda, Conan O'Brien, Eric Andre, Mary Steenburgen, my wife, and flee from the red hot chili peppers. And trust me, it's always a great hang when Woody's there. So why wait? Listen to Where Everybody Knows Your Name, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for up to half the cost. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
All right, I feel like we're getting like a little bit slowed down in our delivery of this show. You sounded so relaxed there in the business section. I'm wondering if it's because you're reflecting like the delivery style of this podcast. You feel like we just need to like stretch a little bit. Is that how you've been feeling?
No.
I don't know. We need to pick it up. And you know how we're going to pick it up, Laura Bricker? We're going to talk about the porn ranch.
Porn ranch.
Oh, thank God.
Porn ranch. Porn ranch. Porn ranch. Porn ranch.
But it was an upmarket, classy porn ranch.
Horses, porn. It had everything.
Horse porn.
A British lady with one eye. Everything.
Yeah. So as they're doing like one of their many searches in the woods, and they're talking about like how Mitrice could have ended up where she did, and they're like, and the only way in was through the porn ranch. And I was like, oh, please tell me they're going to go. Oh, please tell me they're going to go. And they're like, so we went to the porn ranch. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Why not just make a podcast about the fucking porn ranch?
Well, that's what I was thinking. Because that woman was so colorful, the older woman. And then like her daughter's involved in it. And like, oh yeah, like I grew up in this and this was just normal. And I'm like, I want to know about this family. I want to know what happens there. I want to go visit there.
I got kicked in the face by one of my horses and lost an eye, so that was a good excuse. But also, when we shoot, we'd spend 2 or 3 days getting ready. I mean, I'm not going to go and just shoot, you know. It's got to be prepared, a la Playboy, kind of drapey-papey, all that crappy-wappy.
You know, there are only 2 states in the country where it's legal to film porn, California and New Hampshire.
New Hampshire?
Yes. Right, Kevin?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, get your OnlyFans page up, people.
That's right. You are allowed to film porn in New Hampshire.
Well, I believe technically this was a state court ruling on like nudity in film. It wasn't straight up. Yes, you can
film porn in New Hampshire
it kind
and
of all
California.
falls under. Yeah.
Yes, those are the 2 states.
I feel like they probably film more porn in California than New Hampshire.
I think you might be surprised, Toby. I think you might be surprised.
Really?
What are you saying?
Sure
what does Rebecca know that we don't?
That there is porn filmed in New Hampshire. I do know that.
Oh.
This is more interesting than the podcast we're reviewing.
Yes.
It's Laura Bricker's next Leave It to Bricker.
Yes, that's right.
Who's shooting porn in New Hampshire? On whose ranch? The porn ranch. The porn barn.
But once again, Toby, it seems like even the visit to the porn ranch ends up being a dead end of sorts, right? Like we found out that there's a trail in through the porn ranch. We try to go in through the trail of the porn ranch, and I'm like, oh my God, another trail that kind of goes nowhere. It's very disappointing, ultimately.
You left the porn ranch unsatisfied.
But at least it was amusing.
Yes.
The porn ranch part was not the problem with this. I enjoyed that piece, even though, again, it's like, in the end, like, it's much ado about nothing. But I do think part of what they're getting across is like, who was in that environment that she found herself in, right? And the porn ranch is part of it. But then there's like these guys who used to be kids and were sort of California golden kids, or I can't remember exactly how they put it, but like these kind of popular athletic kids who then fell on extremely hard times. And then if you focus on this dude, Rick.
Racist
PCP and heroin, and then later meth Rick.
Motorcycle and racist Rick.
Lives in a dugout. Small dugout with a couch in the woods.
Dude, Malibu must be really nice. People are willing to live all kinds of ways there. You know, your home could be flooded out at any minute. You're home in the woods surrounded by acres of poison oak. You like live in a dugout, growing your own pot grow, helicopters descending upon you at any moment. Just saying, there must be some real benefits to living in Malibu. Kevin,
they got great restaurants if you can afford them.
Kevin, she was able to get a lot of sources to talk to Rick about, right?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, the sheer number of people that she could find to talk about Rick and to give, information that doesn't make Rick look good. I mean, that was pretty impressive, especially when the cops really weren't able to advance their case as much. You got to give props to Dana for sticking with this for as long as she did, and to kind of pull up the stuff here that this case has been covered in a lot of other true crime space. And I think there was a couple of clips of whoever it is that does their makeup and talks about true crime. And those are not serious spaces. And she's taking this serious approach to this. And my big problem is that you have to wait a month and a half of listening to this in order to get to what the meat of this investigation is. But, still props on her for finding people. And there was that one friend that Rick had stayed with, this woman's parents, or he just
a lot of them sounded a lot alike, so it was kind of hard to distinguish.
Well, this is the one who had this very distinctive sort of dramatic flair for talking about stuff. It's like she had too many Red Bulls.
And he wasn't, he was the type that would disappear. He wasn't Rick. He wasn't out in the open, right up in your face and everything else and having a good time. He was like, are they here? He's all paranoid and freaking peeking out the door. I'm like, oh my God, okay. No, I'll see you later.
So the shoe leather stuff was really good, but as we discussed in the first half of the review, I think we spent too much time on other things that could have been telescoped to get to what was really interesting about the podcast.
The shoe leather stuff was good. I will say there was a flaw with it, that there were a couple of moments like this. And I'll say, you say that Dana spent years working on this. It's very clear that she's working on this at the same time she's working on other stories. Mm-hmm. Because she talked about Tui, that investigator that she worked with in another case that we heard. Mm-hmm. And she talked about going on the helicopter tour with him. And I found myself wondering, was that the same helicopter ride, or she went with him in the previous season of the podcast, and she's just doing multiple things at one time. So I think that she's working on multiple stories at one time. So, we shouldn't. For a
90-second audio clip, I think you probably wouldn't take a whole second.
Right. What I'm saying is, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a criticism. Reporters are usually pulling string on a bunch of stories at one time. So that's perfectly normal. I just don't want listeners to think that Pushkin is giving Dana 4 years to put out 12 episodes of a show, because that's not typically how it works.
No.
But one thing that did kind of bother me is that when she'd do these interviews, closer to the end, she says something like, so now we know that Mitrice was picked up by Rick. And I'm like, we don't actually know that. We know that one of Rick's friends says that he told her that. And there's a few things like that where she learns something secondhand, and then that becomes part of the lore of what she knows. She sort of builds a case with a few things like that, and I don't love that. One thing I do love, though, Laura, is digging through a suitcase in the mud to try to find shit. That seemed like a very Laura Brickery thing to do.
That's totally something I would do. It's probably something I've done already. I mean, I spy on my child. I spy on people. Yes. And that's reminiscent of, in the dark when we're in the back and we're digging through the boxes of court documents that are covered in rat poop and stuff. So I appreciate any time that a reporter or somebody on a story takes that next level step to get their hands dirty, literally.
Yeah, let's just start here. Let's bag up the ladies' underwear first. We'll do a full accounting later. But even now, in the moment, it's obvious that this collection does not connect to just one woman. There are all different sizes: small, medium, extra large.
So in talking about Rick, Toby, there is a lot of lore about Rick. We mentioned briefly that one of his friends says he was racist, so he wouldn't have wanted to rape and murder Mitrice, which seems like a strange supposition for someone to make. Dana does point out that it is offensive. But we also hear about his history of domestic violence. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of stories about this guy. He seems to have been everywhere and made a lot of strong impressions on people. How do you feel about those sort of being folded in some of the journalistic facts of the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in that I think it's good as far as sort of establishing his character and sort of that fact that he was a little bit larger than life, I guess, to the people who are around him, and that he was racist and violent or whatever. Whether you can use that stuff as actual sort of evidence in building a case that he might have done it. And I don't mean evidence as far as in a court of law, but in sort of a podcast where the strong implication is that Rick was involved in some way. And they talked to somebody named Jill, who I can't quite remember who she was, but she thinks something happened. He didn't want to tell the cops because he's right out of jail and he's afraid he's going to go right back again. I think the one thing that struck me is that it seemed like a lot of people could see him doing it, or if they couldn't see him doing it, it was for absolutely batshit reasons. Like he was too racist to do it.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell. Like you sort of experience the podcast chronologically, like you're going from 1 through 12 on the episodes. And so I just, without really thinking about it, mentally think that I'm sort of following along with the thought process as it played out. So I'm like, oh, so we're gaining momentum for Rick having done it. And she keeps layering things kind of onto that. But, how it actually kind of played out when she was doing the investigating before she wrote the scripts and recorded the thing may have been a completely different thing. So I try to divorce sort of my experience of Rick sort of being set up as the guy and like the actual investigation and how that kind of information came to her and how she processed it. I don't know if she's being really transparent and this is the way it all played out, or whether she, in retrospect, kind of put stuff together in a way that made sense narratively. But yeah, I mean, I think it is, they have their person they think probably did it, and then you build up this picture about them that makes it seem like it's quite likely. But I don't know if it's technically hearsay, but it kind of comes across that way.
Laura, I have a final question for you. There's sort of this sense of dread that Dana tries to build in the podcast about it being sort of a scary thing to look into. Is a sort of like threats around it and stuff. And I couldn't quite figure out why. At one point, she says that she and her producer are sent these books and they're meant to be like a threat against them for reporting it. And Rick is dead, right?
Right.
And I never kind of got the sense as to what was the reason why people were scared to talk or whatever. It never kind of got fleshed out for me. I got a much better sense of it, by the way, in Murder on Music Row, which I was like, in the beginning of that, I was like, why the hell wouldn't people want to talk about this? This was literally a shooting that happened a million years ago in Nashville. Did you get a sense of that at all? Of like what the dread was or what the threat was?
No, I didn't. And you're mentioning it. I'm like, there was nothing in this. I mean, maybe the dread is getting poison oak climbing around in the woods. The dread is having like a major skin problem. Because I didn't feel like that level of anticipation or any sort of like, as I was listening to this in a way that made me feel like, oh, they're doing something really dangerous right now. Oh, they're really going out on a limb here. The only time I felt that was when we were hearing from the women that had been with Rick. But that was more so because they were talking about their history of domestic violence with him and their own personal experiences. But that wasn't anything that like was going to affect anybody now that was reporting this podcast. That was the experiences of the women that had, relationships with him. But in terms of like what they were doing, I was like, no, you're knocking on the porn ranch door. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
You're riding in a helicopter. That's kind of fun. There wasn't anything that made me feel like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Hey friends, Ted Danson here, and I want to let you know about my new podcast. It's called Where Everybody Knows Your Name, with me, Ted Danson, and Woody Harrelson, sometimes. Doing this podcast is a chance for me and my good bud Woody to reconnect after Cheers wrapped 30 years ago. Plus, we're introducing each other to the friends we've met since, like Jane Fonda, Conan O'Brien, Eric Andre, Mary Steenburgen, my wife, and Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And trust me, it's always a great hang when Woody's there. So why wait? Listen to Where Everybody Knows Your Name, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for up to half the cost. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
Hi, I'm Angie Hicks, co-founder of Angie. When you use Angie for your home projects, you know all your jobs will be done well. Roof repair? Done well. Kitchen sink install? Done well. Deck upgrades? Done well. Electrical upgrade? Done well. Angie's been connecting homeowners with skilled pros for nearly 30 years, so we know the difference between done and done well. Hire high-quality, certified pros at Angie.com.
Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. With the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms, Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers. In fact, Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/podcastfree. All lowercase, shopify.com/podcastfree, shopify.com/podcastfree.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out Lost Hills Dark Canyon? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for this podcast?
I wanted to like this podcast, and I listened to the first episode and I was like, okay, there's going to be something here that's going to get my justice hackles up because we have a missing person and like it's the fault of the police that the person is now missing and nobody's taking it seriously. And I'm like, dun dun dun, this is something I am going to have something to talk about with. And then the podcast just went on and on and on and on. And because of that, it lost the punch because there was a lot in there that didn't need to be in there. The parts that I think were more interesting were actually at the end of the podcast, not the beginning. So if you actually stuck it out, you'd get to the interesting parts, but I don't know why you would be sticking it out. So unfortunately for me, this is a thumbs down.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for Lost Hills Dark Canyon?
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted on this, whether it's a thumb sideways or a thumbs down. I mean, I think there are parts of it. Mitrice's story at the beginning is very strong. I think actually one of the best things we've heard about sort of a person going from strong mental health to sort of very distressing mental illness. So the beginning, that part of it was good. I thought there were parts, especially towards the end, that were good. There's just a lot of stuff in here that even if you kind of kept it in, I think you could have really, really, really tightened up. So it's weird. Like, I think the good parts are much better than something I would normally give a thumbs down to. But those parts are just alongside a bunch of stuff that would have been easy not to have. So I guess I'm a mild thumbs down. I mean, just this, like, listening to the whole thing, I don't think is that great. I'd love to make like a 3-episode series out of this, which I think could be super, super strong and interesting. But this is 4 times that length, and I think that's part of the problem.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm also a mild thumbs down, and it's funny that the things that Toby liked are the opposite things that I liked. So I think there's like, we put the two of us together and we got a thumbs up as well as a thumbs down. I thought that the strongest stuff came at the end because we have, investigative reporter who put in the work to see what she could do to solve this mystery. And we get like a whole bunch of like an interesting narrative with a new prime suspect and, some compelling information, much more interesting than like the things that you would find out there from the Wikipedia Browns who are doing their weekly podcast about the latest, thing that they Googled. Unfortunately, that doesn't come until, episodes 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's a long way to wait. So while I like that, I really can't say, hey, what you should do is listen to this podcast, but start at episode 8. I can't go there. I salute the team for getting the stuff that they did, because if you do listen, that stuff I thought was pretty interesting. But, as far as how the whole thing was put together and what the listener experience is, for me, I can't recommend it.
So your thumbs down?
I'm a mild thumbs down.
I'm a mild thumbs down too. I really wanted to like this. I have not enjoyed past seasons of Lost Hills. And every single time I listen to it, I'm like, why? Like, this thing always comes so close to me, like liking. I don't dislike Dana Goodyear. I really like Dana's voice. I like Dana's writing. I liked like what Dana's trying to do, this sort of very atmospheric, weird place with all these interesting characters. And she finds these like little gems of, stories in there where she can dig something up. And she's actually gotten like some results out of some of her reporting. But the journey is just not well executed. And I really think it's the editing. I really, really do. There's a real flaw with the editing and the execution here. It's way too long. And I feel like the same ground is retrod over and over and over again. A concrete example that I'll give is, we hear early in the podcast that, the victim's clothing was sent along to the funeral home instead of being sent in as evidence. And then we hear the same detail way later in the podcast. And I'm like, these two things are tied together. But like there was so much in between the two that I'm like, yes, I know. But also because it was just very, very poorly edited. And whatever emotional punch that would have had about the family discovering that like was completely lost. So yeah, it's a very, very way too long, poorly edited show. And the parts that were good were so good and they were just completely lost. They were just swimming in a pool of content. So yeah, mild thumbs down for me for this season of Lost Hills. All right, now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the Crime of the Week.
Crime of the Week!
It's never too early to stock up for the zombie apocalypse or the general breakdown of society. Well, that's dark. That's why Costco is having a sale on its apocalypse-friendly food buckets. Now, for only $79.99, you too can get a plastic container filled with freeze-dried food with a shelf life of 25 years. The ReadyWise Emergency Food Supply Bucket has 150 servings of food, including 12 servings of pasta Alfredo, 6 servings of potato pot pie, and 24 servings of whey milk alternative. There's also 16 servings of something called orange drink. Just add water and you too can enjoy teriyaki rice or vanilla pudding after fighting off the walking dead. While it will still be edible in 2050, the bucket only contains rations for one person for about 30 days. So to be sure to buy in bulk for all the preppers in your underground shelter. Panel, the time to prep is now. What food will be in your apocalypse food bucket? Laura Bricker, what do you think?
Oh my God, so many choices. You know, I think I'm going to have to go with the chocolate-covered espresso beans that I got on a few years ago. I think some of you remember when I was eating them when we were taping because that
I do. Hashtag never forget.
That would give me the energy to escape the zombie apocalypse. And they're pretty tasty.
Toby Ball, what food would be in your apocalypse food bucket?
So I plan on making it longer than 25 years down in my bunker.
Uh-huh.
So I'd probably just have a lot of Twinkies because my understanding is those things nothing happens.
Yeah.
It's like styrofoam.
Kevin Flynn, what about you?
Yeah, I too will have Twinkies, but I won't even put them in the box. I'll just leave them out because it'll be okay.
Yeah. Kevin, there's only one right answer for me. What is that right answer?
Double stuffed Oreos.
Taco Bell beans.
Oh, yeah.
Taco Bell beans and Taco Bell sauces. Those jars and those beans in cans.
You won't have the jars, but you have plenty of the packets.
I hope you got separate hope you got separate shelters.
You can buy them on our Amazon list. I buy them in
There's a reason
bulk.
Baked beans are not in this apocalypse box.
It's not baked beans. They're refried beans.
They're beans. They're the musical fruit.
It's how she's going to fend off the zombies.
There you go.
All right, that's going to do it. But before we go, Laura Bricker, they have a lot of fiber. I have to ask, do we have a cat of the week this week?
We have a dog of the week this week just for you, Rebecca.
Yay, my favorite animal.
Comes to us from Susie Kinski. Susie says, we watched Tell Me You Love Me last night, and I listened to the review today. In addition to the many egregious things about the story, my husband and I were so irritated at the way she pronounced D-man as duh-man. Even his mom was calling him D-man. So here's a pic of our dog, who's called Bacon, and they're calling him Buh-man. So Buh-man, B-man, Bacon
Very
man,
nice.
D-man. But the dog is very cute, has lots of little toys. Doesn't have a bacon toy. Maybe we could get that on our Amazon wish list.
That dog is very cute. Like how he's just looking up at us with an extra toy basket. All right, Laura Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you and submit their animals to be pet of the week, cat of the week, how can they find you online?
You can find me at Laura Bricker on Twitter and Instagram.
Toby Ball, how can you be found?
At Toby Ball NH.
Kevin Flynn, what about you?
Kevin P. Flynn.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram or anywhere else, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. Follow the show everywhere at Crime Writers On, and I encourage you to join our incredible community mostly in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. It's pretty freaking awesome there.
Mostly.
Well, I'm saying mostly I encourage people to go there because our group there is so awesome, you know? Just find us on Facebook. There's a pinned post on how to join the group. Get episodes early and ad-free at Patreon. Patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. You'll also get all the other stuff we make back there. There's so much stuff. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our editor is the exceptional Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this program is Kevin Flynn. This show was recorded in Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement that also doubles, by the way, as a completely legal porn ranch.
Oh.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later. Leading off, clip 1. I'm Malcolm Gladwell.
I'm so excited to tell you about this podcast.
You guys have really uplifted my mood, I'll just tell you. In 2009.
I'm so excited to take you out for dinner. These hamburgers filled with mayonnaise.
Oh.
Partners in Crime Media.
Hey friends, Ted Danson here, and I want to let you know about my new podcast. It's called Where Everybody Knows Your Name, with me, Ted Danson, and Woody Harrelson, sometimes. Doing this podcast is a chance for me and my good bud Woody to reconnect after Cheers wrapped 30 years ago. Plus, we're introducing each other to the friends we've met since, like Jane Fonda, Conan O'Brien, Eric Andre, Mary Steenburgen, my wife, and Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And trust me, it's always a great hang when Woody's there. So why wait? Listen to Where Everybody Knows Your Name, wherever you get your podcasts.